Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. Thanks for joining me. I'm Davina and I'm an Australian migrant to the United States, here to talk about politics and the political dynamics of fascism, etc., etc. And today's topics are SNAP payments and how Iowa Republicans have proposed various changes to what is eligible for SNAP recipients to buy in terms of food purchases. So they want to exclude sliced cheese, grated cheese, crumbled cheese, fresh meat. So people would have to buy canned meat or canned fish, which would be higher in sodium, is a more processed food. Also, no white grains, no processed grains. So you'd have to buy whole wheat pasta and whole wheat bread, which is kind of unusual in that Republicans are normally about or claim to be attached to the idea of freedom of choice. But no, it's freedom for them to impose their will on you and to limit your choices, to punish you for your life circumstances and in any poverty your family may be experiencing. And they also want to withhold benefits from families where more than one vehicle is owned or in possession of the family, which is kind of extraordinary because in a lot of Republican-governed states, public transport doesn't flourish, and people often own cars to get to work. And if more than one person, one adult in the family works, then two cars will be a thing. And to say, okay, nope, 2 cars, you don't qualify for SNAP anymore, that's a provision we've just introduced, would be to compound the poverty that a lot of people who are sometimes termed the working poor, people who have jobs and often multiple jobs, but still experience significant poverty because the rent that they have to pay, their living expenses, and their family members, the number of dependents they have, mean they have very little disposable income. And now let's also look at the fair tax bill that House Republicans are planning to introduce at a federal level, which would create an added 30% federal sales tax on top of the 10% tax that people from different states pay already for added to goods and services, many goods and services. So I just wanted to point out the general anti-life, anti-survival in the United States platform of the Republican Party. Christopher's here and says hello. I'd like to say hello back. Nice to see you, Christopher. Somebody wrote that fascism is a political dynamic in which cult leadership forms around someone's promise to revitalize the nation, and does so by drawing a picture of a shifting targets of groups of people to victimize and to blame, whether it be Jewish people, migrants, people from Mexico, migrants from South America, migrants from anywhere, in order to strengthen the in-group identity and good feelings, happy feelings, dopamine rush associated with being termed an authentic member of the nation. So instead of different political parties, you now have a friend-enemy dynamic where your people in your cult following of Donald Trump or the Republican Party, your irrational devotion to voting for Republicans, even if you're a SNAP recipient who's likely to have your grocery purchases significantly curtailed. You don't have political disagreements anymore. You have enemies who are hiding crimes. You have enemies who are responsible for stabbing you in the back, covertly undermining the nation. You can attribute anything to your enemies because a cult leader lowers the bar for what level of evidence you need to be believed, because devotion to a cult leader is different from admiration for a political figure. So Biden supporters might have a Biden bumper sticker on their car, or maybe not. They don't fly a Biden flag. They don't offer to travel to the Capitol to kill for Biden. It's altogether a different level of sentimental attachment than there is on the part of many fervent Trump supporters. And then, of course, there's just the white people who aren't even fervent Trump supporters, who might even entertain the idea that Trump has broken some laws, or Trump has his organization's been convicted of 17 various tax fraud crimes. Maybe they'll even admit that, but they still vote Republican because their loyalty is to a type of dominance status quo that they are incentivized to support. So maybe you can't obviously see the benefits that they're getting from voting to uphold the increasingly open white supremacy of the Republican Party and the increasingly irrational, well, I was going to say irrational agenda, but it's very rational, provided you understand that the Republican Party is the PR front group, lobby group for a collection of corrupted, oligarchical, and theocratic interests. I say theocratic because there are some types of religious people who love to boss others around, and there's some types of potent, wealthy business leaders who also love to create bad living conditions for people, because bad living conditions for people means more desperate people. More desperate people means less empowered people, means less demanding employees, means more easily exploitable people, means less regulations as an obstacle to their profit gathering. And then, as such, their agenda is often extremely counter to the interests of communities, families, and even nations. And Americans are often conditioned to think that the interests of businesses are the same as the interests of advancing America. So the response to national tragedies is often, we'll buy and support industries, buy things, which has given rise to a very entrenched level of acceptance of consumerism as a response to problems. And it is based on an understanding that employment is ultimately a priority for people. People want to have sources of income to sustain their families, to sustain their lifestyles, to sustain life. You can't live if you can't keep a roof over your head and you can't feed your family. You can't just rely on the state. The state can be an unreliable deliverer of food and aid, particularly if you're a SNAP recipient in Iowa and the Iowa Republicans are proposing to cut you off from fresh meat, grains that are white, so white flour or white rice or white pasta, fairly standard food sources for a lot of people. And yeah, well, I hope that was an interesting point. Let's go to Twitter so that we can have a look at other people's contribution to this dialogue. Let's have a look. And we'll touch on George Santos as well, because he exemplifies the degeneration of the current Republican Party, or even the degeneration of their pretense, that the pretense that Republicans have decency or a commitment to truth and integrity and standards. It's a facade that has taken a lot of pounding with the fact that George Santos has been appointed to various committees under the leadership of Kevin McCarthy, who is majority leader in the House of Representatives, and who has let notable insurrectionist Marjorie Taylor Greene be appointed to sit on their Homeland Security Committee. And George Santos, a fraudster who's gone by various names, George Santos, Anthony DeVolder, Anthony George DeVolder Santos, and also a drag queen name that I've forgotten, but who has also notably run a fake GoFundMe that collected real money from the friends and supporters and former military colleagues of an American veteran who was suicidal and relied on a dog, the company of a dog to lift his spirits and connect him emotionally to life, that gave him motivation to live, but who had developed a tumor and needed a few $1,000s for a veterinary operation to remove the tumor. And George Santos was asked to run the GoFundMe because he had a charity called Pets United or something, no, Pet something, and who took that money, who defrauded a veteran and a veteran's beloved companion, leaving the dog to die as a result of not being treated RE tumor removal, and the veteran was in a position where he had to panhandle for the dog's euthanasia and cremation, which he said was one of the most degrading experiences of his life. And that would have been on the news last night, and it's important for people to see that is the type of person whom House Republicans have embraced, and elected to the high office of being on committees within a chamber of Congress. So, looking to Twitter, vote pro-choice. This account is for reproductive rights and not in favor of coerced birth. And they note why the March for Life is a scam, that maternal and infant death rates are both higher in states with abortion bans. It's harder to get health insurance and medical care in states with bans. Child poverty is highest in those states, and pregnant people have less access to care. Now, that all makes sense because, of course, if you say, oh, well, we have an abortion ban, but there's an exception for if the health of the life of the mother is in jeopardy, because it's difficult to quantify precisely when someone's life is now in danger, as opposed to just being able to anticipate, oh, they're hemorrhaging, their life will be in danger at some point. But at this point, 20% in danger is my best guess as a doctor. I'm just imagining a doctor being in the position of knowing you could get prosecuted by under state law for assisting with an illegal act if you help terminate a pregnancy that is currently miscarrying and causing a woman to begin bleeding to death. You might have to send her home to bleed for a few more days until you can, in good conscience, say, oh, her life is definitely in danger now. The blood loss is sufficient that I can say I'm not worried anymore about being prosecuted for aborting a baby. I'm just terminating a pregnancy that was non-viable. It's tying the hands of doctors at a critical moment in women's lives because pregnancy is full of risks. Mortality is a problem in the United States. Maternal mortality in the United States is higher than in any other peer nations. And by peer nations, I mean other wealthy countries. More pregnant women die in labor and die during their pregnancy than in any other wealthy country in the world. So here's why this year's march is different. Apparently, pro-life, forced birth life extremists are marching to the Capitol instead of to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court did what they wanted, helped push along their performative piety goals and gave them that retraction of 50 years of federal legislation protection for women in the United States, which wasn't uniformly applied. There were a lot of states which had wound back the protections afforded by the Dobbs decision. Was it 1972? I should get it straight in my head. When was Roe v. Wade decided? Roe v. Wade. 1973. Oh, I was close with 1972. That was a landmark decision of the US Supreme Court, in which the court ruled that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. So the decision struck down many US federal and state abortion laws. So the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution was deemed to provide a fundamental right to privacy. So something happening in your body that will influence your life, but that also could potentially jeopardize your health and the integrity of your organs functioning, that was up to you to determine if it was happening in your body. You could privately make a decision about that under the ruling of Roe v. Wade. All right, Molly's here. Hello. And someone from Australia. Hi, Joe. Lovely to see you. That's exciting. I don't have a lot of Australian listeners, but of course, as you would recognize, I have an Australian accent. I'm from Sydney, Australia, originally. Yes. There was a lady, I think, who went to Idaho for her brother's wedding and began to miscarry in that state. And her life was put at risk because of the laws in Idaho. What I might do is see if I can quickly find that. Yesterday, was it Iowa? I just saw somebody claim that most women who abort later in pregnancy do so for reasons other than fetal or maternal health. I don't think so. Statistics do not support that. All right. Someone reporting from the march called Alana Vagianos says, listening to the March for Life speaker canonize a woman who heroically died after giving birth to her fourth child. The crowd is cheering and applauding for the selflessness of her decision. So that level of piety, celebrating a woman for the selfless sacrifice of her own life, it's performative because the people whose quality of life are being sacrificed are the woman's three other children and her husband, who now have one less adult in the family to help provide guidance and care and love. So when you sacrifice, typically you sacrifice something of your own. You don't just throw away the quality of everybody else's life. And perhaps that family will, on some level, be able to be happy with a rationalization of that event and say, oh, our dear sainted, wonderful mother, yes, she could have had a termination and saved her life because the pregnancy was threatening her life, but she chose to value the potential life of our future sibling over her own life. So she's gone, and we no longer have a mother, and we don't have that kind of support from a biological parent anymore. We've still got a father, but we have one less supportive parent now. And well, we have what Jesus's endorsement. I don't even know what religion they are, but I'm making an educated guess that these are Christian people venerating somebody who chose to put their own life at risk rather than potentially terminate a pregnancy. So I wonder if I can find any more details about that story. But also I'm being reminded that as the March for Life is happening, that they have included apparently child pornography traffickers, insurrectionists, defrocked priests, people who steal fetal remains from clinics, and white nationalists into their marches. And that's not a surprise in a big picture sense, because the kind of people who want to force women to give birth against their will are the type of people who think it's a win at a religious level to create unwanted children as long as they're being born into a Christian family, even if that Christian family is put in difficult circumstances. Something, something, earthen vessel, something, something. Yes, there is a lot of language to celebrate and promote women, women being sacrificial lambs. And it's very dependent on symbology and very negligent of the real life circumstances of girls and women who may have been raped, coerced, intimidated, brainwashed, manipulated, or just engaged in sexual activity with a man as a peacemaking activity in a challenged relationship. People whose relationships will not benefit from the addition of a dependent. People whose relationship dynamics are frayed and who should be allowed to, under privacy laws, make personal private decisions about bringing a child into the world. But that's me standing up for reproductive rights, reproductive freedom over here, in contrast to the conviction and fervor of the people who want to bully the girls and women of America. And even women participate in it. So it's never a sound argument to pretend that it's just men doing this. There are a lot of zealous, convinced, it's going to sound a little bit bigoted to say brainwashed, but I'll just say very committed women who are important players in the movement to strip rights away from women, to strip protections away from women, to complicate the medical care and treatment of women who are experiencing complicated pregnancies or who are experiencing complicated relationship dynamics and potentially abusive dynamics, and who are unwilling to bring a child into the world, but are constrained to do so by the passing of legislation by Republicans who are very excited to have a fake pious flag to wave, a fake achievement. It's not a real achievement to protect women and children, to force women to give birth to unwanted babies. Hey, I've got to work on my argument so it doesn't sound like I'm just making assertions, but at the same time, it's important to hear each other put a stake in the sand to say, look, this is what I believe in. We can't let the only raised voices be those of the bullies wanting to impose their will on the rest of us, impose their religious values, impose their religious convictions. This is our country, not your church. And even people within various religious denominations support reproductive rights, support the rationale of letting women consult with doctors without the threat or fear of prosecution hanging over their head, without the fear of non-medical professionals making a judgment. Oh, you know what? Your life wasn't really in danger. We don't believe you. We don't believe that you miscarried. Your body is now a crime scene. We're going to investigate you to see if you did something wrong to cause that miscarriage to happen. And you know that those investigations and those prosecutions will be disproportionately concerned with the acts of vulnerable women who are more likely to be targeted because of their race or their level of personal wealth. whereas people with connections and people with higher levels of income are far less likely to be prosecuted for or investigated for a miscarriage or for an illicitly obtained abortion. Anyway, that's all from me for now. I'll say thank you to Molly, thank you to Joe, thank you to Christopher. Any concluding remarks from anyone? I like that the phrase buy nothing is trending. It's good for all of us, me included, to resist the marriage between anxiety and consumerism. Oh, I've got a problem. I should buy something and that'll fix it. And then we can continue to rationalize to ourselves, what a great purchase, best I ever made. It is nice to be able to buy things. But as a species, those of us who can would do well to reconsider if we should. So there's some consumption items. It's always going to be a gray area, not black and white. Do we really need this? It's always debatable. But I'm just cheering a little bit for the side of the debate that urges you don't need it. don't buy the things. Very complicated debate, because now I sound like my husband saying, do you need another pair of leggings? And I'm like, I do. It's important to stay warm. When I'm not warm in the winter, I'm more likely to get a cold. So, I'm not making decisions or urging anybody to lean one way or the other than to say it'd be hypocritical of me to tell everybody else to be better than me. I'm certainly far from perfect in this respect, but it's worthwhile interrogating the idea that we support each other by just buying things and always giving into our impulses to acquire more and to solve our problems through the acquisition of material objects. It's worth interrogating that on occasion. So that's the parting message for me today. Thank you so much for listening to this broadcast. If you have any tips, if you have any comments about the sales tax proposed by the Republicans, called the fair tax proposal, or the fair tax bill that would eliminate income tax, eliminate the IRS, be a huge gift to the wealthy Republican donors who fund the machinations of the current Republican Party. Huge gift to them to eliminate the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, to eliminate income tax, and just to have the people disproportionately bearing the burden of taxation to be those people whose disposable income is entirely taken up by day-to-day necessities. So buying a loaf of bread for a wealthy person is a negligible cost to them. Buying the weekly grocery bills, buying bread for the week for someone of limited means is a much more significant outlay. Oh, and I'm going to just note that Trump dropped his lawsuit against New York Attorney General Tish James, after he yesterday lost with the same Judge Middlebrook of Florida, his civil suit against Hillary Clinton and other people. He sued them for the purposes of advancing the false narrative that he was framed and that he never had any inappropriate connections to Russia. His campaign never had any inappropriate connection to Russia. So he stood up to champion that story, that he's so innocent, which is all a lie, and a lie that the media has often, through its silence, allowed to grow bigger. It's a lie that Trump is innocent of connection to Russia. Trump was found likely to have obstructed justice on multiple counts during an investigation of his ties to Russia. Robert Mueller noted that his hands were tied he felt his hands were tied by an Office of Legal Counsel memo that said can't prosecute sitting presidents. And Robert Mueller said, I also don't believe I should continue with a prosecution if the person I'm prosecuting cannot be tried in a court of law because they're a sitting president. So if Trump wouldn't have the opportunity to defend himself in a court of law, then I will not, in good conscience, initiate a prosecution. But he could have. He could have, and now, it's water under the bridge. We're not allowed to point out that everything pointed to collusion and continues to point to collusion. Trump's obsequious behavior in Putin's presence, Trump's insistence that he accepted Putin's word with regards to targeted Russian interference in the 2016 election, saying, oh, well, Putin told me no, so I believe him over the collective conclusions of America's intelligence agencies. That dude is up to his eyeballs in transactional benefits from Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, etc. And the people who voted for Trump saying, oh, well, he's a good businessman, purportedly, so he'll make good decisions for America. We need more business people at the helm of our great nation. Those people are showing how much they are suckers for the idea of consumerism being the leading guiding light for the United States. Because having a businessman who sees everything in terms of transactions, he made transactions to benefit himself, but also he never looked to the big picture to help safeguard the people of the United States from a pandemic. Instead, he downplayed the pandemic in order to preserve a trade deal with China that he could wave in front of the media to distract them from the spreading recession that had started in the manufacturing sector following his outrageously unsuccessful trade war, where he instituted tariffs, causing pain to American importers, American farmers, and American consumers. And the media refused to explain clearly and repetitively in a way that was needed to the American public exactly what a tariff is, why it's not a tax on the Chinese, it's a tax on Americans importing from China. He didn't tell the public that. The media didn't help address that deficit. Americans had no idea what was motivating Trump to lie about COVID initially, and then later on to dismiss COVID precautions because, well, it's just impacting blue states, so I can use that to give me political fodder to criticize Democratic governors of blue states, which are more populous, which are being hit harder by a pandemic that is spread by international travel initially. Anyway, that is my big soapbox because I'm so, I have such a bone to pick with the media about their handling of that issue. Christopher says he's guilty. He loves to buy things too. I know. And it feels like you're helping America because you're supporting businesses. That does feel like a driving motivation for a lot of people that's permeated all of our brains to some extent. There are a lot of movements to push back. There's minimalist movements, buy nothing groups, free cycle groups. So I should try and lean into that a bit more. Okay, take care. Everyone, thanks for watching, and talk to you another time. Bye.